All right, everybody. You just tuned into Random Radio. Welcome to another episode of Just Ask, the podcast where you ask the questions and we give you the answers. I'm your host, Nicholas John Random, and we are live at Stimulus Cafe and Coffee House in beautiful Durango, Colorado. Today's podcast is going to be all about those things that go bump in the night. So, our question today comes from Bethany in Florida. Now, Bethany remembers when she was a little kid, she had a ghost that would be in the back room of her house, and it would scare the living daylights out of her. So she's decided to ask us, what do we know about ghosts and spirits and demons and all the interesting, crazy poltergeists of the world? Well, this is a subject that I'm happy to tackle. It's a little tricky, and it's going to cover a lot. So we can dive into individual ones later on down the road, or individual stories you know about if you'd like to. But this podcast, I'm just going to do a broad spectrum glance at all the different varieties of the spiritual poltergeist demon world. So where do we begin with this one? Let's see. Let's just start with the basics. Let's start with ghosts. So, ghosts. What are ghosts? Well, your basic ghost is somebody who's still remaining after death. Now, I've mentioned it once or twice on this podcast before, but I have a unique sensitivity when it comes to everything that we're about to talk about, spirits and things people call demons and things that are, coming in from a different side of the universe into our realm. I don't know why, but I have a tendency to see these things more than most people do in my day-to-day, everyday life, and I've gotten used to it over my life, but when I was a child, it deeply disturbed me, and it disturbed me more because I couldn't talk about it. And as such is the life of many, many people. There are several people, like myself, who grow up in this world and who don't really know what to do when they see things that are out of the ordinary, like ghosts that are extremely vivid to them, or things that most people would classify as demons or monsters under the bed, all sorts of crazy things you can't talk about when you're a kid. I grew up in Missouri, and the people I grew up around were wonderful, wonderful people, but not very educated. And a lot of them believed in, good old-fashioned Christian morals. Even if they didn't act on them, they believed in that stuff. So it wasn't an option for me to mention some of the things that I was seeing on the daily basis. Even if we were in houses, there was a couple times, me and my mom lived in a trailer once that was very, very obviously haunted. Even if you weren't like me and couldn't see the ghosts directly, which I could as a child, and they would come into my room at night and stare at me while I was sleeping, and just notice that I could see them. That's real disturbing as a child, and it will mess with you for life. But even people who can't see them, there's some places you go to where you have poltergeists. So there's a difference between ghost and a poltergeist. A ghost is just a spirit that's just there. It's somebody who's dead, who's passed, supposedly. This is the regular definition. The definition of poltergeist is, quote unquote, a noisy ghost. In other words, they're a ghost, but they have the ability to move things and break things and touch things and scratch and bite and do all sorts of things like that. And there was a number of places we lived in as a child that had poltergeists that, even if you weren't sensitive to being able to see them like I was, it was very obvious that those places were haunted. We lived in a trailer once in a little town called Reed Springs, Missouri, where things flew off the walls and broke. In the middle of the night, the dishes would fly out of the cabinets and smash on the ground. That place was extremely haunted, very, very obviously. There's a number of weird, mysterious things I found on that property. I knew it was haunted from the moment I was there, but I couldn't talk to anybody about these things. And a lot of people growing up in the world can't talk about this kind of stuff because they'll think you're insane. You'll think you're insane. It's when you start seeing things that most people can't see, it messes with you because you wonder whether you're insane, and then you're called insane because the majority of the people can't see them and they just think you have mental problems. Sometimes in really, really negative results, they'll put you in mental hospitals, they'll electroshock therapy and crazy, crazy drugs just for seeing things that other people can't see. Which I'm going to tell you this as a grown man who's now studied the science of life in huge, huge depths. The idea that we still do this to people, we still do this to children. If a child tells you they're seeing a ghost or something like that, or tells you that there's a man standing at the foot of their bed when you don't see a man standing at the foot of the bed, do not put them in a mental institution and give them drugs and call them crazy. That's really, really messed up, especially when we, as an educated person, you should understand that we know very, very little about the world that we perceive. But the stuff that we do know is enough to know that there are lots of things that we don't know about. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, like, just think of it as simple as your eye, the human eye, might just be developed differently among different people. The human eye has a visual spectrum that's very, very, very small. There's a very, very small visual spectrum of light that can be viewed and deciphered by our human eye. We know that the light exists from all different ranges, ultraviolet, microwave, radiation, radar. There's all sorts of crazy light out there that should exist and should, be all over our vision. But our regular eye can't interpret those lights. That doesn't mean those lights aren't there. It just means we can't interpret them with the eye that we are given biologically. Don't you think it's at all possible that some people are born with, slightly changed, slightly different eye that gives them the ability to perceive things that are maybe on a different spectrum of light? Just simply that. We're not even going to talk about paranormal, anything like that. Just simply that things like, we'll call them creatures, demons, spirits, poltergeists, ghosts, entities, whatever you want to call them, could be just on a simply different wavelength of light than the normal eye perceives, than, let's say, 95% of people perceive. Instead of calling those little kids crazy and shoving them into mental institutions and pumping them full of drugs, if you have a child who's able to see things like this, I implore you, just talk to them about it. That's the important bit. Talk them through it. Talk them through it scientifically. Have them experiment. Because I can tell you, there's a lot of different kinds of things out there when it comes to creatures and spirits and poltergeists and demons and whatever you want to call it. Some of them, the baser ones, like we're going to talk about first, ghosts, the baser ones, and poltergeists too, usually, they're not bad. They're not bad things. People have all sorts of different theories when it comes to ghosts and poltergeists. There's the old cliche from all the movies, which is, they're people who died, and when they died, they had unfinished business, so they remain around Earth, in this form, because they didn't get to, they didn't get to go to that wedding, or they didn't get to, grow up, or they didn't get to do this, or they didn't get to do that. Yeah, that's great for stories, but is that what I believe? No, it is not. I am a man who can both see ghosts and a man who understands science. When it comes to ghosts, there's a couple of different levels. So, okay, how do we start this? So, there's your classic ghost, your regular ghost, which is, it takes the form of a person who has passed on. It is literally like in the shape of a person who has passed on, and they hang around usually in one area, like a house, or a room in a house, or a hallway in a house, or just a whole house, or a street, or a field, or something like that. They hang around. They're located to one area. Then there's poltergeists, which are slightly more energetic versions of ghosts. See, a ghost will just hang around, and sometimes you might catch a glimpse or see it in a camera flash, or, when the light changes slightly, or you might hear their voice or things like that. They're just kind of there. They're very echoey. They're around, but they don't do a whole lot. A poltergeist is like an energetic ghost. So they do all the same things. They're usually, located in one spot, one room or one house or one whatever, but they have more autonomy. They can mess with you a little bit. If it's a room, for instance, they can touch you while you're sleeping. They can slam doors. They can pull things out of cabinets, like I was talking about there. But essentially, they're the same kind of thing as a ghost. Then you have energy. You have it's basically a ghost. It's a spiritual energy. So it's basically a ghost, but it doesn't take a physical form. It's just an energy that's around. And usually it can affect the temperatures in rooms. It can affect the emotions in rooms. You can catch it sometimes on cameras and things like that as a cloud-like thing or a light. There, it's energy. And then you have the fourth type of regular ghost, which is haunted objects. Sometimes the energy of a dead person will go into an object, and that object can be as small as a penny and as large as a house. But it's essentially a haunted object. Now, what do I think these four things are that I just talked about? These ghosts and poltergeists and haunted objects, haunted houses, and spiritual energies. What do I think these are? As a scientist who can also see these things, I believe they are not your deceased relatives. I'm sorry, but I don't believe grandma's hanging out. Don't get me wrong, I think that kind of thing does exist sometimes, where grandma can be around, but that's a little bit different, and it's not ghost related, and I'll get into that, I suppose, later on. But right now we're just talking about the ghost thing. So what I believe ghosts are, the majority of ghosts, the thing about our bodies is we are complicated little machines. Our brains and central nervous systems run our entire body, and they run the body off of electric impulses. Like, you can't pick up your hand and move it without an electrical signal coming from your brain down your nervous system to your hand and having you move. You can't do anything without an electric impulse running from your brain to your central nervous system to make you do stuff. Our brains are weird little mushy electric computers. And I think what happens sometimes is your brain gets overexcited. And sometimes that happens when you die. What do I mean by this? So they have done, you've seen MRI and CAT scans, the images where they're looking at somebody's brain while activity, and then they play like soothing music to see what parts of the brain it's stimulating and things like that. Well, they also do that whenever somebody's in real pain, and the brain lights up because it's sending all these impulses everywhere all over the body because it's in pain. Well, the physical earth, is a complicated landscape, and it's got electromagnetic fields that generate all over it in different places. We have ley lines, and people have a tendency to think of ley lines as these mysterious, interesting, weird places for the paranormal or strange, unusual things. Well, part of that is probably based in the fact that scientifically ley lines are very electrical. They're very, there's a natural energy running there, and it's not natural like energy, like we all need to just peace, love, and jelly beans. No, I mean natural energy as in like energy, like electric energy flows along ley lines, which is why a lot of weird things I personally believe happen along ley lines. One of those things is spiritual energies are attracted to them, and it might just be that they're amplified by some weird thing going on with minerals in the area, or certain levels in altitude combined with certain levels of geomagnetic forces going on in certain areas. All sorts of weird, strange things that go on in Earth could be affecting certain areas. I believe that sometimes when a person dies in a particularly painful, sad, emotional way, their brain is going off. Like, their brain is sending all those signals like crazy off when they die, especially if it's a really, really painful death. You're in a lot of pain, your brain is going da 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 all over the place, and then you die. Well, if you're in a place that, the earth has this kind of weird vortex situation going on, I believe it's possible, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Earth either, by the way. We make things all over the planet that are electrical. We could accidentally be making little electric Verde cages without, actual wires. Just ones made up by Wi-Fi and, just random microwaves and things like that are just trapping energies in certain places. So it's possible that when somebody dies in a particularly tragic, not tragic like, oh, he died, he was too young. I mean, like painful, like somewhere where their brain is going off electrical with impulses, and then they die, it leaves an echo. This is what I believe ghosts are. They are echoes of somebody who was once alive. They are not that person. I see these things all the time. And for the most part, I am going to clarify with the words most part, they aren't that person. They are echoes of a person, especially the standard ghost. Like the standard just has a shape and wanders around depressing. They're echoes of somebody's spirit or ghost. And it's weird thing where it's like it's leftover brain chemistry mixed with leftover whatever the heck the actual human spirit or soul is. It's this weird little echo of that hangs around a certain place. And the reason they're generally stuck in certain spots is because that's their little Faraday cage. That's their little energy vortex that they're stuck in. That's where they can go. Now, sometimes you will find that certain people have energy themselves. There's certain people who have an energy about them, and those people can bring along ghosts for the ride. There are plenty of stories, and I know myself, I have accidentally taken home a few spirits from places I've gone because I put out a lot of energy, like around myself. I know that. And there's people who do it who don't realize they do it, and they can definitely take things home with them because it gives the ghost something to latch onto. Now, when it comes to poltergeists, here's something that I have observed throughout my life. Poltergeists are essentially ghosts, but with more energy. For whatever reason, maybe that person's spirit, more of it was left behind. Maybe the area is more electrical or housing this energy. Maybe something is causing them. I don't know what it is. Something is causing them to have more energy than a normal ghost. So they can interact. They have emotions. I mean, realistically, they have emotions. They're usually strong emotions. They're not comprehending emotions very often, but they are usually, how do I describe this? I've had conversations with ghosts, but not like I'm sitting down having a cup of tea in a conversation. I mean, I've talked to them and they've responded. Now, when it comes to communication with ghosts, I need you to think about it much more like not you're communicating with a person, but much more like you're communicating with a well-behaved dog. So a dog who understands what you mean when you say sit or go or, whatever. They understand you, but they can't actually communicate with you very well. They can even say words because they are usually based off of humans. So they can say words, but it's not like it's much more like communicating with an animal who happens to be able to talk sometimes. There's no, you can get them to leave areas and you can get them to listen to you, but it's not like you're sitting down having a cup of coffee and a conversation. It's not like that. Poltergeists get angry and sad and mad, and sometimes mischievous. Mischievous is usually what's going on. They're not usually angry. When they're breaking stuff, it's not usually anger. It's usually mischief. And the thing about it is, in my experience, is these things, they have a slight awareness. They have an awareness of what they are, or that they're around and they're in this universe where they can mess with stuff, but something's wrong and they don't know what it is. I think that, like I said, they just have slightly more energy than a ghost, and they don't quite understand what's going on. So they play with things and they mess with things, and one of those things is people. Obviously, there's people everywhere, and that's one of the things that's around. And when they notice that a person can notice them, whether that is a person can see them, like myself, or a person just notices that they moved the curtains, or they close the door. When they get that attention, just like anybody, imagine you were stuck in this scenario where no one could hear you or see you or anything, and you were just there. You just had to be there, and you were there for who knows how long, and you couldn't get anybody to do. You couldn't do anything. You're bored out of your mind. Forget that, but you're going crazy. So the moment you realize somebody can notice you by whether they're seeing you or whether it's because you pushed something or you were able to move something, and somebody's like, "What's that? What's going on over there?" The moment they do that, they get that attention, and they're like, yes, finally somebody can see me. So they try and try and try and try. They really try and get your attention. If you are a person like myself, this is really bad. It becomes fine if you can maintain your sanity. In the growing years, you will get used to it. But if you're a child who, like myself, sees these things and saw them when they were a child, it gets really, really bad because these ghosts really, really want attention, and they get attention in a couple different ways. They get attention by, playing with you or trying to scare you or trying to do this and that and whatever. And as a kid, like I said, when you don't know what the heck is going on and you can't talk to it about anybody, it's very, very terrifying and can really, really mess you up. Especially because children usually don't know how to tell them to stop. And you can tell them to stop, and you can put an end. You can send out your own energy. I'm not trying to sound like a hippy-dippy character or whatever, but the world is very confusing, and science is just along the same lines as magic. It's just a little harder to understand sometimes with magic. But you can send out your own energy from your body in a directive force and tell these things to stop messing with you. You really can. And you can use physical words. You can use literal words to do it if it helps you. But it's not terribly hard to get rid of these things once you know how. But you don't know that when you're a child, so it can be really, really messed up as a child. So, yeah, poltergeists usually just looking for attention. Once they see they've got that attention, they're going to keep messing around. That's what they're going to do. Then you have like I said, you have what we call spirits, or just the energy, where it's not a physical form. It doesn't take a physical form. Sometimes maybe a cloudish kind of a thing, but it's not a physical form. That, in my opinion, is, like I said, most of these things are energy based. They're leftover residue, echo kind of an energy. And I think over time, because I never see ancient ghosts. I know it's weird for you to hear somebody talk about the fact that they see ghosts, but I'm just going to keep going and hope you all don't think I'm a totally crazy person. Even if you do, I don't care. I am. It's fun. I never see ancient ghosts. Ever. I see very old ghosts, and I see them all over the place. Most of the time, I'd never tell a soul. It's just for me. But they're all over the place, and I can tell you I never see ancient ghosts. I live in America, the United States of America, and the oldest ghosts I see generally have a tendency to be Native Americans. And I see them a lot, and occasionally some ghosts from like colonial times. Usually they're more modern ghosts. And I think this is because, again, it is energy, and energy dissipates over time. And I think one of the processes of it dissipating over time is you turn into just that energy form of a ghost, where you can affect people's emotions and the temperatures and things like that in a room, the ambient feeling in a room. You ever walk into a room and you just have a bad feeling? Well, sometimes that's just leftover energy. And then you have ghosts that inhabit objects. Same kind of thing, I think, as a traditional regular ghost, the ones that take human form. I think it's just at the moment that they arrive in ghost world. I don't know how that works exactly. Do they show up immediately when somebody dies, or does it take some time? I have no idea. That one is one I honestly have no idea how long it takes. But usually I would assume right when the person dies. But I think what happens with that, because this is when I don't really know, ghosts I can see, spirits I can see, poltergeists I can see. Objects, I can tell there's obviously something going on with that object, whether it's a house or whatever, because it has the same feeling. I don't know how to describe this, but it has the same feeling or the same electrical, emotional feeling as a spirit or a ghost in a room, but it's an object. These things, I think it's just whenever they, like I said, whenever they form, instead of forming what they know as themselves and becoming a human shape, they just go into whatever's around, whatever happens to be in the room, whatever happens to, it might even be the room itself, goes into the walls. So it's just a different form of ghost. Again, usually not bad, just there, just kind of like hanging out and seeing what's going on. So ghosts are for the most part harmless. Now let's move into some of the more interesting stuff. So let's say demons, or things people call demons, and the bad guys, the bad ones. Well, this one's a bit tricky. There are definitely a number of things out there that are not ghosts. What they are is very, 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 very tricky and hard to say, because there's a lot of different kinds. Some of these are creatures, and when I say creatures, I mean physical creatures. And some of these are non-corporeal things, like ghosts, where there's no physical body. There's a number of them. Some of them, and there's some that I don't even know where to put, what category to put them into, because I've seen them and I haven't gotten close enough to touch them, and I wouldn't try. When we think of demons and things like that, most people think of like creatures that possess people and ghosts from hell, essentially, like bad guys. Well, I don't believe there's ghosts from hell. There's definitely creatures out there who can possess people. That is a real thing. Possession is a real thing. You've seen all these exorcisms and stuff like that. That's a real thing. I don't think it's demons from hell, like the hell, the Bible hell. I don't believe that's what those things are that people have. You've seen videos of people being possessed and doing some crazy stuff and speaking weird languages and all sorts of stuff. I don't believe that they're creatures from hell, but they are something. They are some sort of crazy creature that does exist and can possess people. I've seen people possessed who are alive and wandering around, who are acting like normal people. That's the really scary one. People who are possessed and nobody realizes they're possessed. Like literally something else is in control of their body and mind, and they're walking around with a meat puppet, essentially. And the thing about that is 99% of people would never ever know that wasn't their friend. And again, this all sounds like crazy nonsense or horror movie stuff, and it is. But it's also real, unfortunately. Most possession takes a toll on a body. And it has physical markings and physical things. And that's usually what you hear about when you hear about it, exorcisms and things like that. And there's clear indications that something's not right in that person. It's because the human body has a lot of control. The brain has a lot of control, and it will resist, just like it resists a cold virus. It will try and resist possession, absolutely. So whatever is trying to take control of a human body will be fought off by you and your body. Those things, I don't necessarily know what they are. If I had to guess, it's something from some sort of different plane of existence, because there are multiple planes of existence. And what I mean by that is not heaven and hell. What I mean is even modern scientists will tell you that we live in a world that is not just 2, 3, and 4 dimensionals. We live in a world of multiple dimensions, and we can't perceive, because we operate in the 3rd and 4th dimensions generally, we cannot see into the next dimension. How do I describe this? So we are in the 4th dimension. I can look at a 3-dimensional world on my computer, which is a 3-dimensional world. Like I'm viewing it in 3 dimensions. If there were living creatures in that 3-dimensional world, I could perceive them, I could mess with them, but they could not perceive me because I'm in the fourth dimensional world. Well, modern science basically says that there are up to 13 or 14 dimensions, and that while we can perceive things in lower dimensions from us, it's the same for those things. So if there are creatures or beings who live in, say, let's say the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, whatever dimensions, they can perceive us, and they can even mess with us. They can even, poke us and have things go on. But we can't perceive them because our visual spectrum doesn't allow us to see above dimensions of our own. That's science. That's a basic principle of modern science. And I think this multidimensional world we live on is definitely responsible for a lot of weird things that people perceive as paranormal, whether that is aliens or things people call spirits or strange paranormal things that happen. I think that has to do with a lot of it. Sometimes there are things accidentally poking their noses into our fourth dimensional world, and they're not from our fourth dimensional world. So we perceive them slightly and skewed in a weird way, and we're like, well, that was supernatural. So when when we're talking about possession and stuff like that, it could be that there's some sort of really awful thing out there in, let's say, the fifth or sixth dimensional world, and they can perceive us, and they're trying to puppet us, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. There's also creatures. There's a lot of weird creatures out there, and some of them, I believe, have the ability to transfer from our fourth dimensional world to our fifth dimensional world. Like, they're just creatures. They're like dogs or cats or mice or rats or just scary little creatures, wild boar or whatever. But imagine a wild boar who can hop from this universe to another universe. Sometimes those things exist, and they're viewed as demons or crazy monsters or things like that. But I think they're just creatures. They're just creatures that happen to, be invisible to most people because we don't have the right visual spectrum, or they're from a different dimension in which we couldn't interpret them visually anyway. But they're there and they affect things. Then there's weirder stuff. There are things like Slender Man, Ancient Tales of the Babbity Book, and all these weird creatures, nightmarish creatures, Thin Man, the Hat Man. I've seen almost every one of these. I've seen Slender Man or Thin Man or Tall Man, whatever you want to call him. That one's always the same. It's the same thing. It is look different, but it's the same thing, in my opinion. It is one kind of creature, and he's terrifying. Usually standing in a corner, long legs, long arms, long fingers. And if I had to guess, I would say that this thing is, I think there's some sort of weird combination. Just like we were talking about, poltergeists are ghosts with more energy. I think sometimes these things, rather than fade away, get stronger. And they form a new kind of a creature that exists. Either one was something like this Thin Man, this Hat Man. The Hat Man is also very similar to Thin Man or Tall Man. Long arms, long fingers, long hat, long hair, long teeth, long face. And I think it's essentially one of these poltergeists that's slowly obtained more and more energy. And they might have developed a way to get energy through. Remember when I said that they were attention seeking? Well, whenever you scare somebody, energy pops in their brain. Like I said, that's probably how ghosts form in the first place. So when you scare somebody, a huge array of emotions shoot up in their brain, and a huge burst of electrical impulses fly out of their brain. Brainwaves, literally brainwaves. That could become a source of food for some of these creatures. And it could make them stronger. And they could be able to become things like Thin Man, Slender Man, Hat Man. There's also a creature that I've had a number of experiences with this one and friends who've grown up with them that has arms. And I don't know how to describe this other than arms. It'd be arms coming up from underneath the bed, or arms coming off the ceiling, down from the ceiling. Sometimes they're blue, sometimes they have tattoos, just long arms. These ones are very similar, is again, very similar dynamic to Slender Man. They usually hang out slightly out of sight, but draw on the emotions of you. There's also things like what folklore calls them incubuses or succubuses. Now these are things, they're in modern times we will call them sleep paralysis demons. So somebody will wake up having sleep paralysis where they can't move their body, and they'll have visuals of some sort of creature, some sort of what they would call a demon, sitting on their chest or sitting at the edge of the bed, and they can't move, they can't do anything. Well, I think, again, this is one of those type of creatures. This is one of those creatures who draws off of your fear and your emotional energy. And if they can put you in a catatonic state or keep you in a weird dream state and make you think you can't move, even though you can, they just want you to think you can't, your fear jumps through the roof and you start to emit all this energy, and they feed off of it. And those ones are pretty rough and pretty scary. What else do we got? Let's see. Well, then you got things like angels, what people perceive as angels. That's complicated. I think people will perceive a number of things as angels. So there's traditional ghosts that sometimes people get confused and call them angels. I believe there are some extraterrestrials out there who look like angels. And just like I was talking about with the negative energy, I believe that there also are some spirits who respond to positive energy, and you get a something in between, kind of like the Thin Man, where it's negative, where it's in between a poltergeist and a physical being. I believe you get something like that for the positive as well, and sometimes people call those angels, but I don't believe they're from heaven. And if there is an angel from heaven, that dude's probably an extraterrestrial and probably doesn't care about you in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, he's probably more dangerous to you than I am. What else do we have? When it comes to creatures, there's all sorts of creatures. There's the skinwalkers, and we've talked about a few of those kinds of things. And there's orbs, and there's all sorts of wacky creatures out there in the world. So I can't really get into creatures unless you say specifically, hey, I want to learn about the chupacabra or Sasquatch or something like that, or leprechauns or this or that, or fairies or such, which I would gladly go into any one of those subjects. But I figured this one we would just keep mostly towards the spiritual stuff, so the spirits and ghosts. But yeah, I think that covers most of the ghost topic. There's definitely all different kinds of spirits, but I believe that most of them are echoes. I think they're echoes of a spirit and a life that was around at one point in time, and they either don't understand how their physical form works in non-corporeal form, and they slowly fade away, or they become stronger and stronger. They figure it out through either fear and scaring people and terror and things like that, and drawing energy from people that way, or the opposite, from happiness and good things. There's protector ghosts out there. We've heard of these. They hang around kids and things like that. I think those things are there and they exist. I also believe that there are a number of creatures out there that are extra dimensional, as in they come from or can traverse different dimensions, and we sometimes get a glimpse of them and we get confused and we're like, well, that's a demon or that's this or that, when really there's just some creature that's just sitting on a different plane of existence and we can't always see it. But yeah, I think that covers it, guys. I think that's as far as I can get into that subject right now. If you want to know about something more specific, just ask. But thank you for joining us here today. I've been your host, Nicholas John Random, and we are once again live at Stimulus Cafe and Coffee House in Durango, Colorado. Don't forget to click that like button down there and that subscribe button down there if you like our podcast. If you got a question for me, send it at random@cafestimulus.com, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. If you feel like supporting us a little bit, head over to our Patreon account at patreon.com/randomradio. You can also check us out on Facebook, facebook.com, Random Radio Podcast. I hope you like our YouTube videos so far. We're going to keep putting out one every week for quite a while, and then it'll just go straight to our podcast all the time after that. You can find the podcast on any one of your favorite platforms, but you already know that already since you're listening to it. Thanks again for listening today, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Just Ask.